Welcome to My Morning Cup, a podcast produced by Costa Media Advisors and brought to you by the generous support of the Tennessee Valley Authority. To learn more about TVA's impact on our community, follow TVA on Instagram at TVA and on Twitter X at TVA News. My Morning Cup, where we have interesting conversations with genuine people. I'm Mike Costa, your host. My guest this week is Charlie Brock. Charlie is a native Chattanoogan who has made his mark supporting the entrepreneurial ecosystem, not just in our city, but all across the state. Charlie, welcome to My Morning Cup. Before I ask you about growing up Brock in Chattanooga, let me ask, what's in your morning cup?
Great to be with you, Mike. Thank you for the opportunity. This morning, I have Needlo's Finest in my morning cup. My daughter went and got a cup of coffee for me this morning, but I love coffee and I love trying different things. I'm a Mad Priest fan, I'm a Needlo's fan. I'm a Four Sigmatic. Think coffee is one we keep at home.
So you support the local coffee folks.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And very sweet of your daughters. All three are very sweet. I'm sure they brought it to you as a triumphant.
They were paying me back for the ribs I cooked for them last night. So,
oh, you did ribs,
yeah.
huh?
Well, she came all the way from Australia, and that was her one request. Said, Dad, when I'm home, will you make some of your, not famous ribs by any stretch, but she said, will you make your ribs? Because I can actually do a pretty decent job on the grill with some ribs. So.
Well, we'll have to try that sometime. And just to kind of make the connection there, my daughters and your daughters knew each other through GPS, and one of them through Swanee, and have all become close friends. But you and I have known each other, gosh, now probably close to 20 years.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And we share not only love with our daughters and great friendships there, but also our love for the Tennessee Vols.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm sure I'll see you this weekend. This is Tennessee, Florida weekend. So we'll be up there. Well, welcome, Charlie. Thank you so much for coming in and being on My Morning Cup. And as I was talking to you a little bit earlier, I'd really like to take a linear look at your career. So I'm going to start at the beginning. You're born and raised in Chattanooga, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
What's it like to be a very prominent Chattanooga family? And you've got a bunch of siblings, don't you?
I do have a bunch of siblings. I'm one of 6. 4 of us live here. I've got lots of cousins, so I get lots of people say, okay, I know you're a Brock. Now, which one are you? Where do you fit in? Who's your dad? So the Brock family tree, sometimes you feel like you need to wear a placard around just saying, here's how we all fit together. But it's been a great blessing and wonderful to have family, and we've got a wonderful, we've had a great lineage and very fortunate to have that, and folks who've stuck around this community and been involved in the community.
It's you and I are very similar in that I'm one of 7, and very similar thing in Memphis for my family. There's a lot of cousins now, and you almost have to wear a name tag that says, this one is my dad or this one is my mom along the way. That's
right. I was a Rotary member at one point before I ended up moving to Nashville for several years with my role with LaunchTN. But I remember when I did my introduction, and I had to say, here's the Brocks that I'm not. Here's what I get called a lot in terms of which Brocks, but help kind of lay that out for everybody. So, but again, I'm very blessed to have that opportunity.
And where do you fit?
Of the 6, I'm 4, number 4.
I'm 4 or 7.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. So your family also had a pretty prominent business, Brock Candy. Did you work in that business at all?
I did. So my great-grandfather had, both my great-grandfathers on my dad's side moved here around the turn of the century. Yeah. So one of them, W. Brock, started, he was a North Carolina native and worked for R.J. Reynolds, and he moved here and bought a wholesale candy company called Trigg Candy Company, and then ended up renaming his Brock Candy Company. So that started in 1906. So he built that, and over time, and we had a 5-story, I guess, plant right downtown, right where the kind of the public library is now. So growing up there and growing up in that business, and again, Chattanooga was very different. And I want to talk about a lot of manufacturing downtown. We were part of that before we moved out on Shalford Road in 1976. But I worked there. I do remember as a kid, I was the most popular kid in my 4th grade class for at least a day, because for my birthday, I got to take our class down there to the Brock Candy Company, and some nice receptionist gave everybody a red food bag, brown bag to put candy in as we were going through the tour. So
what a cool deal.
Yeah, it was great.
So as a kid growing up, family business, did you do like most kids did, like I did, start out sweeping floors around the family business and stuff like that?
Yeah, I remember absolutely. The first summer I worked there in full was my senior year in high school, and first shift, which started at 6 a.m., and you've just finished your senior year, you're getting ready to go off to college, and you're not wanting to be getting up and we lived on Lookout Mountain, so I'm leaving home at 5:15 every morning to be at work at 6.
Yeah.
Get
and
ready.
That's cutting it close.
Yeah. Well, get there and then get ready and be on the floor with the lines running at 6. But it was a tremendous opportunity and really gave me an appreciation that has certainly stayed with me for all my life in terms of understanding just folks at different levels on the socioeconomic ladder, and seeing for the first time folks who wanted to be working on third shift or wanted to get that second shift because they really needed to work consecutive shifts because any extra income they could bring in. So an appreciation for the folks who had helped build our company, really. And it was also from the appreciation for the family continuity through the years in the leadership at Brock Candy Company, because some of the folks that I met then had actually been hired by my great-grandfather.
Wow. That's
and,
something.
Yeah, I'd worked for him for a few years before he left the company and passed away. And then my grandfather, who had run the company for 25 years, and then my dad, who took over in the 70s.
Did you and your siblings get involved in any of the management of the company?
Yeah, we absolutely did. Coming back, I ended up coming back after I went to college. I went to Nashville, was in a training program at Third National Bank that then became SunTrust Bank, which was a tremendous opportunity for me and a tremendous kind of platform for business that stayed with me and been helpful in all the business things I've done. But I came back here, and our company was going great guns, and this was right around 1990, 91, and I'd gotten married, and it was just an opportunity to think about coming back to Chattanooga and being part of this business. So at the time, my dad was running the company, had 3 brothers in the business, and the opportunity to join them. Yeah. And I was, in the banking business, and I'm working with different companies. Some are slow growth, some are really accelerating growth and profitability and adding people. And we were in that situation, even though we were a 70 or 80-year-old company, 85-year-old company. We had some real recent growth and new products that we had developed that were going great. So it's a great opportunity to be part of that.
Yeah. So and I want to go back a little bit. When you graduated high school, went to Swanee.
Yeah.
And the thing I love about Swanee, because my youngest daughter went there, everyone who goes to Swanee, it's the greatest place on earth. and you get up there and you realize, gosh, they're right. It's pretty good. But that was a very formative place for you, I'm sure.
Yeah, and it was, Mike, and you know this with your daughter, and I've had 2 of my daughters go there as well. Now, the relationships that are formed there, I guess the isolation in some sense, what some people see as a barrier and there's a downside, it's such an upside too in terms of the relationships and not just the student relationships that you have with your fellow students, but the faculty relationships and the community relationships. And those are, I'm still really, really close with a lot of my Swanee crew. And we're, our reunions every few years are amazing. And we go up there and just the love for that place and for what, not only the education that you get, but just also the commitment and the thought about service and community. It is a huge, been a huge force in my life for that.
Yeah, and I've noticed that with my daughter, not just the relationships, but what they teach you about serving the community and being part of the community. And I wanted to go back to that because when you got out of school, you mentioned the training program. And can you talk a little bit about that, why that was important? Because you came out with a liberal arts degree. Right.
And I was not, I wanted to, when I was graduated, I was going to go up to Europe with some buddies for the summer and maybe the fall. And then I maybe wanted to go to Colorado and work in the ski town.
Oh God, you sound like my daughter.
I know. But I interviewed with Third National, just an interview experience. When they came through campus December or January, I guess, of my senior year. Interview went well. I got invited back for a second interview to go to Nashville, and that's when it was a full day interview, and you're interviewing 10 different folks. And I was so taken with the people. Quite honestly, I met there, and I actually interviewed with a guy who became my first business mentor after I joined the bank. And I just saw what an incredible bank it was and what a great group of people. And then Nashville's like, okay, this would actually be great. I didn't, still don't know if you're going to get the job offer. And when I did get the offer, I didn't take it immediately, and I was talking to my dad later. Sunday night calls. That's way back before mobile phones, and you're checking in with the parents every week or two on Sunday night. And I kind of mentioned it, kind of like, "Oh, by the way, I got this." And he's like, "Well, when do you start?" And I said, "Well, I'm not sure if I can do that, Dad, because I'm going to Europe I was going with 3 of my buddies." And he said, "You need to be in Nashville on June 23rd.
Oh, what a smart dad.
And I was. So I did go to Europe for about 2 weeks, and then I came back and left them, and it was a great decision. That was also, as you know, it's a different deal now, and I'm involved with the bank now, Pinnacle Bank, as a board member. But the bank then, it was really commonplace to have training programs every year, and they're hiring 10 to 15 kids out of just graduated from college, putting them through a 1.5 to 2 year program, and it is just incredible learning.
Keith Sanford mentioned the same thing when we had him on the podcast about how important that bank training program was to him, because you look back and say, boy, that was such a luxury that a company would take that much time to train you rather than just throwing you in. But that's the way all companies did it then.
Yeah.
And particularly banks.
And we were working on the teller line for the first 3 months, a week of orientation, then you're thrown in as a teller. And again, to get that appreciation for Friday at 3:00, and you start to see everybody getting off their shifts and lining up. And I was in West Nashville, so we had a heavy kind of blue collar area. And again, appreciation for how important those checks were, those folks, every Friday. And then then it's customer service for 3 months, and then out on the branch floor as well, and then the credit program for a year, and then out as a loan officer. So it was just amazing. With
direct deposit, you really don't see that anymore on a Friday, because that used to be the thing, is particularly in the 80s, Fridays, as you said, from 3 p.m. on, the bank line would be 10, 15 people deep with the deposits, well, some without even a deposit slip, just cash my check.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. It's amazing too, looking back, and this has served me very, very well in the different business endeavors, including my own businesses I've started or been part of starting with Third National. They put us for 4 months. They put us in an MBA program at Belmont. We didn't even we weren't working in the bank. We had to check in and go to a meeting every Friday afternoon at the bank just to talk about our week. But we were in 4 different MBA level classes at Belmont, getting paid to do this. And
so you're working for the bank,
amazing.
But they're paying you to go to school.
To go to school, yeah.
Do any companies do that anymore?
I think, some do down, after you've served some time for a while. Certainly not 1 year into it, though, for a, fresh-faced 22-year-old. So,
yeah. So you moved to Nashville, and was there any aspect in your mind, because, again, I'm going to go on some personal experience here. Was there any aspect in your mind that said, you know what? I'm one of 6 of Pat Brock's kids, and I've got all these cousins around. I really need to go somewhere else to kind of establish who I am.
Well, great question. Dad had a wonderful philosophy. He said, you need to go work at least 2 years somewhere else before you think you can just come back to the company.
That's great.
So there was never this sense of, we had plenty of fun in college and did all that, but when I've got a job waiting on me right after college. So I've got to get out there and work. And he said, you need to be bringing something back of value. And part of that is that you've been in another work environment. You've seen how what work is and contributed to that, and what are some specific skill sets that you might start to learn, develop, and some aptitudes that you start to get that you can bring back to the company. So it was a great, especially with the big family, lots of cousins, as you say. Yeah. So it's not like, we're going to have 25 Brocks who just came back right after college.
Well, and I think that's an important aspect of go somewhere else and see how they do it before you come back into a family business, which is all you've been exposed to.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So I think that was a great kind of philosophy that he had that served the company and all of us individually very well, because it forced us to, again, don't take things for granted. And I talk a lot about, as I work with entrepreneurs, work with other folks that I'm talking to, about value. What are your values? And also, what value are you bringing to the enterprise, whether that's a startup, whether that's a community organization like LaunchTN or CoLab? And what is the value that you're bringing? And how do we really plus that up? And how do we help develop that with you so that you – so, I think I was impressed upon that early by my dad.
How long were you in Nashville?
4 years.
And what was I don't want to say the lessons, but what is it you took from Nashville, that experience? What were the positives that came out of that experience?
Well, again, seeing a lot of different types of businesses, and we had just gone, it wasn't a great economic period in Nashville, and there had been some tax law changes at the federal level. So a lot of companies, I mean, the bank was, it was a tough time in the banking business. So again, getting appreciation for that and understanding how, businesses go through ups and downs, and we were very much a relationship bank. And Third National had been a longstanding, great brand name in Nashville. We had just been bought by SunTrust, so we were going through our own, merger and acquisition type growing pains there and challenges, but trying to say, okay, we're still going to support our businesses that have been part of this bank and help grow this bank over the years. And so again, that sense of trust and relationship commitment was important. And then just the learning that I got, again, appreciation for different challenges that businesses go through, and talking to these business owners was tremendous. And the people that I met at the training, and my mentor, again, who became my, when set up as a mentor program, but he was the guy I interviewed, and I really think he helped push to get me in that position. So we want a liberal arts guy in here. And he said, he's going to figure it out. We'll just get him here. He doesn't have to be a finance or econ major, and we're going to put him in business school for 4 months. And so that was a great relationship that I maintained with him until he passed about 10 years ago.
Well, you mentioned something that I think is kind of coming back full cycle here. Businesses identifying liberal arts majors, where for a long time there, it was, liberal arts, what are you going to do with that degree? And I think a lot of people are cycling back to get someone who has a broad education,
right? And
then you can teach them the specifics.
I speak to student groups now. They're, the average, I'm not sure what the latest, I hadn't looked at in the last several years, but Forrester, I think, or Gartner had come out with some information 4 or 5 years ago, and the average college student today was going to have 14 different jobs by the time they're 38.
Wow.
And I've had a lot of different things that I'm doing. I'm close to that now, and different opportunities. So the ability to at least assess, to think critically, to build relationships, to dig in, I think the liberal arts is a great training ground for that. It is a challenge, though, in this very technical, highly developed, specialized world that we're living in. How do you think about that, balance that versus somebody just getting a technical vocational education? And it's a both and, right? It's not a one way for everybody.
Yeah, there's not one pure answer on that.
Yeah.
So what brought you back?
Well, I mentioned I'd been married. That was a great thing that my dad telling me to be in Nashville at June 23rd to start that training program, because in the training class, I was one of 12. Who became my wife, Lisa, who was a Vanderbilt graduate. She was also in that class. So I met.
I didn't know she was in the same class.
I met Lisa on our first day of real work in life post college. So that was great, and we were friends. And you're kind of thrown in there with your training class. You start hanging out together, and so we had some great friendships again that we developed. Obviously, Lisa and I did, as well as across our class, folks I still keep in touch with. Yeah. And so we, we're friends for about 6 months or so, and then we recognizing there might be a little something more there. But I remember our first week at the bank, Friday afternoon, they'd said it was kind of all right, you get to ask some folks who are 4 or 5 years ahead of you in terms of going through the training program, what are the do's and don'ts now? And the management was not in the room. And we're like, what should we do? And I said, look, y'all are going to be hanging out a lot together. Do not date. That is really frowned upon in the bank. So no inter-office romances here. And it's time it seemed fine. And 6 months later, we're going, how are we going to work through that? Yeah. But we worked through it in a really, I think, in a good way. And then a year and a half later, or 2 years later, we got married, and we had about 30 people from the bank at our wedding. Great. So it worked out. And it also helped. I was on the commercial side, and she was on the retail side. So she was out in the branch system once we finished the training program. But we were in the credit department together for about 9 months. So while we were dating. So it was all very hush-hush, though.
So Nashville was a good move for you.
That was great.
Yeah.
It was great.
What was the decision to come back? Was it Brock Candy coming to you and saying, hey, we've got some opportunities, or you said, I'm married now, we may start a family or have started a family and would like to get closer to home? Yeah,
both of those. The above? Yeah, but really I would say, because Nashville's so close still, and Lisa's parents, who are very, very close to, and they live in Nashville, they lived in Nashville at the time. But it was really, I think Brock Candy was the huge draw there and saying, this is a great time, whether I want to do this for the rest of my life or not, because I always had this part of this, I'm fourth child, and I'm going to go do my own thing. And that manifested itself later. I had that opportunity, but it was just such an opportunity to come back and be part of a really exciting time. So I came back in 90, joined the company late 90, and then we had an IPO in 93. So that was really amazing journey to get to participate and go on the road show and be part of that.
Go pitch the company. And,
And then we, and I was just a, attendee, a bystander there watching
but
it
you
all.
learned,
but I learned a ton and walking through that and watching my dad and my older brothers, Paul and Dave, were very much a part of that as well and helping pitch that to investors. And that was a great learning.
You mentioned earlier that your dad said, go work 2 years somewhere else, learn some things. Did you have other rules that separated family from business? Like no business talk, Sunday dinners, that kind of thing?
No, I think we kind of did that naturally. Yeah. We had there's with 6 kids, there's people are coming and going, there's lots of activities, everybody's busy and other things. So I don't remember as much talk about that. I remember sometimes when my dad would be getting together, my Uncle Frank, who ended up leaving to run Covenant College, I guess he left in 85, 86. So I remember he and Dad, when they'd be getting together, or my Uncle Bill, when he came home, he was in the political world, but when he came home and they're catching up on that. But I don't remember, night after night, it was not a lot. I think, Dad was
not
like, let's leave that. Yeah. And it was also a different world. You were not connected to it 24/7 with the phones and all that. And he would get the calls if something happened at the plant. And he's down there and does whatever he needs to do and goes down at any time of the night, right, if there's an issue. Mm-hmm. But I don't remember that being a daily or nightly dinner topic.
So you go through the IPO process. What happens next?
Well, we were then approached about a year later by the other Brock Candy Company, BRACH, out of Chicago. It was an amazing story. They had started 3 years before us. And so by the Brock family out of Chicago, they had gone through some changes and sold to Klaus Jacobs, who was a Swiss, very, very, very wealthy Swiss businessman, and he had bought the other Brock. So he contacted my dad and said, "Hey, we'd be interested in taking a look at your company." And I think my initial reaction was, Dad was like, "We're not for sale. We're going great guns. We're now publicly held. We're growing. We were looking at growth opportunities, additional plan opportunities. I got 4 kids in the business. Mm-hmm. We're not interested." But over time, Klaus could be a very persuasive fellow over time. And they continued to talk. And Dad was also like, we're not moving from Chattanooga.
Right.
And because they were, BRACH had the largest, at the time, sugar candy plant in the country. And they were in Southside Chicago on Cicero Avenue.
Cicero.
A lot, gated, very much barbed wire fence all around the plant.
It's a tough area.
But it was, and we weren't looking to move. And we were very much community oriented. Mm-hmm. We were a good corporate citizen here in Chattanooga. For my dad, my grandfather, my great grandfather, all been super involved in the community over the years. So Klaus said, "Well, we're not looking. We're interested in Chattanooga being the headquarters," and that was a huge.
Yeah, I bet.
Okay, well, let's keep talking then. So the fact that they were willing to say, "We'll move out of Chicago, keep the plant going in Chicago, but we'll move headquarters to Chattanooga," and they were about 4 times our size. I mean, it's all public information. So, but they were. So the opportunity for us then to have a company that was, 4.5, 5 times bigger here in Chattanooga. And so that was a great, compelling reason there.
Does that kind of freak you out as a sibling? You're working in the family business and all of a sudden it's being sold and it's like, okay, I get why we're being sold, but where do I fit?
No, Dad, it was great. And I remember we went on a family vacation August of 94, and that one was very much, it was a group decision. Obviously, he's talking to his brothers, we're talking to our cousins, but, they were like, y'all are running, your branch of the family's running the company. Mm-hmm. So really, y'all need to help, y'all will drive this decision. So Dad was very tuned into what each of us, Paul and David and Hamilton and I were working at the company at the time, as well as Kingsley and my sister Catherine, who were not working the company. But he wanted, what was our interest in being with the company long term? Did we want to eventually take over the reins and grow this thing, keep growing it? And so he was again super attentive to all of us that way.
Yeah, and you eventually left the company to Was it go to Foxmark or?
No, I left, I guess I was the last one to leave 2.5 years later. And there were some great things in there. I was going to Chicago every couple of weeks, and it was a great learning to be part of this too, and the Brock brand. And so we were Brock and Brock Confections now. And so, but it was just we'd had a great family culture at our company, even though we were, 850, 900 employees at 3 different plants. There was a great feeling of continuity, of trust, in leadership, in great relationships. And we had our challenges. Nothing was perfect, but we lost some of that. And it was just a different mentality, not just around how we're going to run the company, but how do we think about our brands? How do we service our customers? And so it was fairly apparent within a year or so that this was going to be short-lived. And they hired some great people. They did some good things. We were hopeful that was going to be a long-standing thing in Chattanooga. And unfortunately, it didn't work out that way. Now there's an auto supply plant out there, 600-700 jobs. So that's great to see, but it's been through some ups and downs.
Yeah. And once you decided to leave, what did you do?
I was early 30s and going, okay, what am I going to do? I'm got a lot of energy. I want to be involved. I started working actually for a while, and I knew I didn't want to be a consultant long term, but I had a couple of companies that reached out to me in the confectionery business and said, would you help us be on the sales and marketing side? So I was doing some consulting and saying, I want to find my own gig. I'd actually always I wanted to go start my own company. At some point, I want to run the show. And whether that had meant staying with Brock Candy for a long time, and again, a great sibling relationships. I love working with my brothers, but I said I want to run the company at some point. So I did the consulting thing for a while, and then I met Hal Bowling, who had actually started this advertising company. Mall advertising company was just getting it off the ground, Foxmark Media, and hired me as a consultant to help him put together some sales materials. We kept started talking in a serious way, and then within a couple of months, I joined the company. And then ended up becoming CEO, and then we went through the business of building a business and raising money.
What did Foxmark do?
We were in a very niche advertising, mall advertising, which then it was out of home advertising was the second highest growth category. Well, Mike, from your media business, outside internet advertising was really coming into play then. So this was 1998.
Yeah.
So that was a really heady time, and people were jumping in the internet.com craze. But out of home was second strongest growth market there, or growth category in advertising. So mall advertising was a small piece of that, but we competed against the big out of home companies like Clear Channel Outdoor, CBS Outdoor, Viacom, a French company called JC&Co. And so they were doing a lot of other out of home, and we're not paying as much attention to the mall business as maybe they should have been. And they were more interested in just the top markets, top 20 DMA markets. We started actually with CBL with contract to handle 6 of their malls. Clear Channel had all their malls. They had about 27 malls at the time. Clear Channel had all but 6 of them.
In the markets so they didn't want.
2 in Knox, Foothills Mall in Maryville, and we had 2 in East Tennessee, and then Mississippi. And so we started trying to generate local advertising because the national advertisers were not interested in those markets, which is why Clear Channel and CBS and JC&Co didn't want them. And we started generating revenue from these local markets now, that typically the mall owners were not getting revenue from those.
Almost by necessity, that's what you had to do.
Yeah, no, that's right. I mean, that was either we're going to do that. And we had great visions of trying to sell to national brands, but it was very much a DMA driven. You're calling on their media buyers in New York or LA, and you start talking to them, even in Chattanooga. Once we got all the CBL portfolio, and then we started adding other mall owners that we were working with, other developers, and you're talking about, Hampton Place is getting 1 million people a month in their impressions. They didn't care. Not at the national level. Yeah. Now, you can go talk to folks locally. Sure,
it's a bigger deal.
I'd love to put in some signage. So we were doing directory signage. We were also putting in other signage on soffits coming down escalators and different things, and just being entrepreneurial, saying, where can we generate dollars? So we had local sales reps in different communities around the country, and we were blitzing markets and doing long-term contracts.
So did that scratch that itch you had to run the show?
Yeah, and it was also such a wake-up call. I remember the first year we forecast $300,000. And again, I was kind of spreadsheet junkie. I learned at the bank. I came out, I was like, and I loved doing that. I still love doing that. And we forecast $300,000, and it was just Hal and me and part-time admin.
Yeah.
And we did $60,000 in revenue.
Oh, wow.
And so again,
You forecasted 300?
My world the last 15 years has been around a lot of ecosystem building, working with startups, mentoring startups. And so whenever I see their forecast and investing in startups through our angel fund, I've been through those wars of going, okay, your revenues are typically going to be maybe half of what you project those first few years, and your expenses are going to be double. So let's start from that basis.
One of the things I discovered when I was a sales manager, and we would have account executives put revenue budgets together each year on what they're going to sell into the next year. Everyone was so damn optimistic. You would look and say, okay, you did 100,000 this year, and you're projecting 500,000 next year. Where is that going to come from? And then when you start to break it down in the accounts, you're going, I guess you're right. Maybe, I didn't know that business was going out of business. Maybe I ought to take that one off.
Yeah, that's fine. I know that well, and also I do this with entrepreneurs too. Don't come in here and talk to me about the market size and that you're just going to get. If you could just get 2% of the market, you're going to be $100 million company in 5 years. You got to have a bottom up forecasting. Go tell me what you're going to do. Who are those accounts? How much inventory are they going to buy? What does that look like? And part of that, to go through those, you got to go through the process, right? And that's also how you learn the business.
Yeah.
And so anyway, it was that was a wake up call for us early days. But it was interesting. As we grew the business over time, raised outside funding as we had growth opportunities from angel investors. The local sales angle that we had was a huge piece of us getting contracts with national mall developers. Yeah, Westfield, that we ended up doing a deal with. They had 68 malls across the country, including 28 in California. And we ended up getting that business, not because anybody could handle their California malls, but they also had malls in Cleveland and in St. Louis and in other markets, Tampa, that the national folks weren't buying. They knew we could generate dollars from there selling locally. Plus, we could sell their New York, Chicago, and LA and California malls.
How do you scale up to that? Because it's you and Hal and an admin, and I'm sure are you hiring salespeople or are you contracting?
We went through initially we contracted to save the dollars and the commission only, and eventually said we got to have our own people.
Yeah.
We got to have them accountable to us every day. We got to have sales targets. We've got to be able to make those hard decisions if not hitting those. So we got to go raise the money to do so. So it was really very much a matter of, okay, we can't self-fund this anymore. And again, I'm fortunate. We had some money that I was able to self-fund for a while. We were, because I had some from the rock candy sale, but I knew that was not a permanent situation, and it was not going to allow me to grow the company, the way we needed to. So we had to go get outside investors. And I always tell, people say, well, what about the dilution? Well, I'd rather have a small piece of a watermelon than have the whole grape. And so that's what we did over time. And we ended up, it wasn't, we had more investors tell us no than yes, but we had about 16 angel investors who invested in us over a 5-year period. As we took on, eventually we ended up with 135 malls in about 35 different states.
Having been in that position, what's the most important thing you could tell an entrepreneur who's been self-funding and is starting to see some traction there and it has that growth? What's the lesson you learned from that here, let me save you a lot of time?
Yeah. Well, you've got to surround yourself with folks who want to be part of this journey, whether that's employees, whether that's vendors, customers, and investors. And how do you bring together folks who there's some shared values and shared interest alignment, and investors are looking for return, but can you also bring in strategic investors and put them on your board and let them help you grow the business and guide the business? And doing that versus doing it on your own, it's really, really hard. Entrepreneurship is a contact sport, and having co-founders and a team in there is absolutely crucial, in my opinion.
How long did you go at Foxmark before you guys sold?
Yeah, we ended up selling at the end of 2006. I was approached in spring of 2006 by an Australian company called UAE Media that was part of a publicly held media company in Australia, and they had TV. You may have known the 10 network over there.
I've heard of it. Yeah,
big media company over there. And I was outdoor advertising part of the media company. I mentioned Westfield earlier, the developer, so that was our biggest relationship. They had Westfield, their home base was Australia, Sydney, Australia. They had malls in Australia, New Zealand, England, Malaysia, and then the U.S. And they're based in L.A. here for the U.S. So we had all the U.S. malls. iMedia had all their other malls in these other 4 countries, and they wanted to have the rest of that relationship. We had also signed a terrific agreement with Westfield. I went out and raised some more money to do that. We secured what at the time was the very best contract in the mall business. And I paid them an upfront, and I gave them warrants in my company. So if we sold, because at this point, I knew we wanted to sell the company. Yeah. We were growing it to sell because the writing was on the wall that malls they liked the income that was coming in from this, and they were going to be doing this themselves. Yeah. So I remember walking into some media buying agencies in New York, and I walked in, and there's a representative of Westfield, our largest client, and they've been in there pitching the same media buyer on a banner program that we had tried to get the rights to sell, and they said they're going to keep it themselves. That's when over time, this is going to be a losing game when your largest customer is doing the same thing, calling on the same customers for you just for other media properties.
So you sell it, and obviously a good time to do that. You're what, late 30s, early 40s?
Yeah, late 30s. Yeah.
And I at that age, I would look at that and go, I've done pretty damn good. But I know you've got very interested in some mission trips and some other things. Where does this take you next?
Yeah, and I stayed on board for a year. That was part of the deal, just for finish the buyout. I had to stay for a year. I ended up staying for a year and a half. They were great to me, and I was leading business development for this Australian company. But after a while, we had, kind of hit our lick, and I was like, I'm tired of doing conference calls back 14-hour times.
Yeah,
differences. And also, the world was changing in 2008. So we sold end of 2006, and then you've got the economic financial crisis of 2008. So we're going, okay, business development in the mall business is going to be slow. So anyway, I left then, and I was actually going to do service work, mission work. I'd gotten very involved started to get involved in Haiti, or been involved in Haiti, but started and said, I'm just going to do community service for 3 years, figure out what is really most important to me. And I did that, and I've continued to stay involved in the community. But after 6 months, I said, I've got to get back into the business game. I mean, I love business. I love the action. I love being involved. And I said, I'm going to do both. I'm not going to ever quit doing community things, but I got to get back into the business. And it was interesting because, again, the world had changed. A lot of people had asset values had shrunk. A lot of traditional investors had seen their asset values shrink, so they were not going to be investing in startups. And we didn't have much of a startup culture here, quite honestly. So we started really 2009 working with a number of other folks in town to say, how do we build our entrepreneurial ecosystem here? What are some of the things that we need to be doing? And one of those that some of us got excited about was starting an angel investment fund. Because, Mike, I had been fortunate. Again, I had some dollars in my pocket when we started Boxmark, so I could help self-fund for a while to at least get us to a little bit of all right, we've got some traction here. We're showing there may be a market here. Now we need some outside dollars to fuel our growth. And again, we did that 3 different times. But I was also able to go call on a lot of folks in this town because my family had been here, 4th generation. Yeah. We'd gone to we just knew the people to get in.
Relationships are important.
And whether again, I had more tell me no than yes, which was fine, but I was able to get into people, whether I knew them or one of my family members could open the door and say, hey, my son or my nephew's trying to raise money, can he come see you? So I never, that's been a huge driver, quite honestly, for me of saying we've got to change that so other entrepreneurs have opportunities. So that was, for me anyway, part of the mission around starting an angel investment fund for the community.
So how do you change that with the angel investor fund? And a related question to that, how did you know who to go talk to for money? Was that just based on past history of who you knew, or was it just pretty much we're identifying these people as targets?
Well, there's some amazing things going on at the time, 2009 through 2011. So we didn't open our fund until 2011.
And what's the name of the fund?
Chattanooga Renaissance Fund. And there was just so many things. People were starting to say, what do we need to do here? And actually, as is often the case, some of the foundations were integral to seeding this. So Sarah Morgan, and she has, when I always call her out for this, and she was at Lyndhurst at the time, and she helped start a program called Innovate Here, and it was a forgivable loan program. And this was in 2009. And really for the first time, and there's about 15 of us who were advisors for that program, and we started meeting on a regular monthly basis and hearing pitches from entrepreneurs. And they could get up to $150,000 in forgivable loans in 3 different tranches, but they had to have a presence on Main Street. So it's hard to, you remember this, Main Street was a very different scene.
When I interviewed for my first job here at WDSI, they were off of Main Street, and I'm driving in from Memphis, and I get on Main Street, and I go, well, what the hell have I done?
Right. I know when you're driving, from Market and Main towards Dodge. I mean, there was just not a lot of stops along the way, and you didn't need to.
No, you hoped you didn't
have your windows up. So that has started to change with programs like Create Here, and we're starting to get some energy on Main Street, and the arts move. Create Here, and when artists were setting up shop there, and then you had like Bluegrass Grill and Need Loves, where I had my coffee this morning. We're opening up, so you're starting to see some activity. And we, CoLab, which I later became the head of, was right there on Main Street. So we were trying to get entrepreneurs to open up shop on Main Street. That was all part of Innovate Here. But really, for the first time, you had a group of us meeting on a regular basis, advising companies, making investment decisions for companies, and then saying, okay, who's going to serve on the advisory board for this company going forward? And 2 of us were always raising our hand. And you start to see that again. And I'd had that, again, fortunately, that I could call on those folks, and I could have not only access to capital, but access to mentorship. And my dad and my brothers were great business mentors. And I mentioned the guy at SunTrust that I had met back in the late 80s who was still involved. He was super helpful. Again, I had some of that network. So Sarah, through convening this group and providing us the capital, we started making those decisions. And so again, from that, a lot of different of that group of 15, it's been interesting to say what they then did to contribute to the entrepreneurial ecosystem. A number of us were part of starting Chattanooga Renaissance Fund, David Blitz and Roddy Bailey and Stephen Culp, and we drafted in Jack Studer and Miller Welburn. And then Jonathan Bragdon, who then went on to start several capital groups, and then Capacity Capital being the latest. So it's just been fun to see. It's fun to see the outgrowth from that. So that was really, from that, we opened the Renaissance Fund in 2011 and then raised a second fund in 2014.
And how does that take you to launch Tennessee?
Well, I agreed in 2011. Governor Haslam had come in, and as part of his economic development plan, he talked about one of the stools was innovation and entrepreneurship. And as a state, we really had not invested much in formalized programming for entrepreneurs. He had actually repurposed some money from some other economic development initiatives, started this, and then they had the idea to set up a network of entrepreneur centers across the state. And this was at the time under ECD, Economic and Community Development. And then they made the decision, said we need to get it out of ECD. We need to have its own organization focused on this every day. But as part of that, there's 9 different regions around the state, the way ECD breaks up the state from economic development. So we're going to help support an entrepreneur center in each of these regions. So CoLab applied to be the entrepreneur center for our 10-county region in Southeast Tennessee. As part of that, I agreed to come on as head of CoLab. So I joined and started leading CoLab November 1 of 2011. And then EPB had been building this fiber optic network. So we now had the opportunity to have gigabit internet speeds throughout the community. So we launched our first Gig Tank Accelerator program summer 2012. And I was the lead on the director of that as the head of CoLab. So we ran the program. And again, part of that, I think Bill Haggerty, now Senator Haggerty, was head of ECD. And I remember he came down the first week of our program at Gig Tank, and he was like, "This is amazing. We had 8 companies here, one from Northern Ireland, one from Tennessee, the others from across the country, here to help us think about what do you do with the gig and build your business here." And he said, we're going to pull this out of ECD. I'd like you to come to Nashville to lead Launch Tennessee. And I was like, "Bill, we just started Gig Tank. They're not here just for me, but I can't right now. They're here for the next 10 weeks, and they moved here, and I was part of recruiting them here, part of selecting who's here. We've also invested in them. I'm here. Let's talk in August." And he came back in August for our demo day, and ECD folks did, and they said, "You ready now?" And I'm like, "No, I'm worn out." But they kept on, were very persuasive, and I ended up agreeing to go to Nashville and to lead Launch Tennessee starting January of 2013. So I think Haggerty and Governor Haslam liked what was happening here. Nashville had set up Entrepreneur Center, Michael Burcham. They were doing great guns, and they're like, okay. And Memphis actually had some really good things. Some folks who had been doing things there on the entrepreneurial front. So he said, let's come to Nashville and help.
So back on the gig tank thing, just to clarify something. These companies are coming from across the country, across the world to pitch, choose us to be part of this program. And then you choose them, 10 of them. Well, I think you said it was.
Yeah, 8 of them.
8 of them.
Yep.
They have to move to Chattanooga. And they spend how long, a year and a half?
No, it's just a summer program.
Just a summer program?
Yeah,
So,
basically 12 weeks.
So to a degree, what Brickyard does is similarly based upon that. Is that too much of a stretch?
No, not at all. Brickyard's a private enterprise, a private investor, so they're taking an equity stake. We were giving these companies for Gig Tank $15,000. So this is really just spending money to help pay for the program while you're here. But it was I talk a lot about collaboration. Collaboration is absolutely key. And not only did we have EPB that had developed this fiber optic infrastructure that gave us the opportunity to market this program, we had a number of us for about 6 months meeting every week to say, how do we put this together? We're nowhere on the entrepreneurial map yet. How does Chattanooga help attract people from all over the country to do this? How do we market the gig? How do we do that? And so we had a campaign called Geek Move that we marketed nationally and internationally, that we could tag a geek. And if they applied and were accepted to our program, we gave them $1,000. And so we were running that through Collab, but Lamppost Group had recently been stood up. So we were working closely with Ted Allen, with Barry Davis, Barry Large and Alan Davis to say, okay, how do we work together on this? So we ran the company side of that. They ran a student edition for Gig Tank where they had about 10 or 12 students who were coming in who had ideas, and they were working on their ideas. And so it was a great collaborative effort. Chattanooga Renaissance Fund put some money into them. We had Blank Slate Ventures that just started here, put some money. And this was important. We got free housing from UTC. It was great. Big. It was during the summer. Yeah. And we called on them, and they say a lot of entrepreneurship, I call it intentional serendipitous collisions. The more you have entrepreneurs bumping into each other, comparing notes, even if they may decide their idea doesn't work, how might they combine forces? There's just good things that come out of that. So UTC putting them all up for 12 weeks was huge.
I don't think people realize all the different moving parts that have to come together for an entrepreneurial ecosystem to grow. You could go back and look at EPB's fiber optic network and the gig being a huge factor in all that, but it couldn't be just that. You had to have people like yourself, companies willing to step up and do things and to grow this.
No, you're exactly right. And I call it the wheel of support for entrepreneurs. And it's really, you got to have mentors, you got to have investors, you got to have programmatic leaders like we were at the time with the program at Collab. Tasia Malakasis today, Collab, and her team's doing the same kind of thing. Professional service firms. We had free office hours from Chambliss, from HHM every week for entrepreneurs. That was a huge thing to be able to offer. So in a community like Chattanooga at the time that we didn't have a rich entrepreneurial history, well, we did going back 70 to 100 years.
Coca-Cola, Brock County.
But not so much in the recent vintage, right? And so how do you have some other factors that are sticky for entrepreneurs to say, I'm going to go there? I remember taking them up to Oak Ridge National Lab, which I'm working closely with now in this quantum initiative. That was a huge thing to take them up to the lab, and we had access to resources there that was, again, a differentiator. A couple of years later, Branch Technology ended up coming here for a summer accelerator program. There was a voucher program that gave them access to equipment and training at Oak Ridge National Lab. So it's a team sport for sure. And how do you get industry involved, not just on the in terms of utilities and in terms of nonprofits, but how do you get industry involved? How do we have our major companies supporting these startups and maybe doing pilot programs with them if they have products that are developing for their industry? How do you get the industry investing in the startups? That's still a challenge for us, but we're making some great strides there.
Related to EPB and fiber optics, we're now into quantum. You brought up quantum. And I asked you earlier before we started recording to give me the thumbnail of quantum. I think that was 3 hours ago. No, it's difficult to understand because, and maybe it's not difficult to understand for someone like myself who's not a real technical person. I look back and I look at EPB Fiber and the gig and what that did to boost Chattanooga. Talk a little bit about where you see quantum going. And I know it's a longer out in the future play overall. But why is it so important for Chattanooga and business to embrace quantum and what's going on?
Yeah, no, great question. And, Mike, I'm not a technical background person either. I'm a business person. I have had the opportunity to spend a lot of time with technology companies through Chattanooga Renaissance Fund and leading LaunchTN and taking companies out to Silicon Valley and all that. So, tech-enabled businesses. But I was, certainly not familiar with quantum. I took AP Physics back in the day at Macaulay, but that was a long time ago. So it's been an incredible learning experience for me over the last 8 or 9 months about trying to get more versed in terms of, and I will never be the quantum physicist and don't need to be, but I need to be able to at least identify companies and opportunities that might benefit from being here in Chattanooga to take advantage of this quantum network. So really what EPB has done, and we can't, I think, overstate the importance of EPB and their importance to this community and what they have done. And they're really one of the most forward-thinking utilities in the country. And, they've been providing energy distribution for this community for 85 years. Going back to Harold DePriest and now David Wade, to have the vision and with their board and the city leadership, John Kinsey and then Corker and on through to Mayor Kelly, Mayor Wamp today to say, how do you support, EPB? It's a city-owned utility. And their vision back around the turn of the century to say, how do we think about communications of the future and energy grids of the future? So when they laid in the fiber optic infrastructure that gave us, we became Gig City, and we had the most ubiquitous, fastest internet in the country. Yep. And enabled us to do things like Gig Tank. And even if companies didn't need to have that kind of bandwidth, the fact that they could come to Chattanooga, enjoy some of the many things that we love about Chattanooga, the outdoors, the livability, the affordability, and have the fastest internet in the country was a huge draw for us. And companies like Brickyard, I think that's still a great draw. Now EPB's got this 25 gig fiber, both ways in terms of symmetrical fiber speeds, internet speeds, so that's been amazing. Now, most recently, they're building part of that, a quantum network. Eventually, as quantum computing becomes more accessible, applicable, affordable, they will need quantum networks to connect them. And so that we've kind of got first mover advantage. There's other communities that have quantum ecosystems they're building, but we have the first commercializable quantum network. There's 12 or so other quantum networks and others in development right now, but across the country, but they're at national labs, universities, that type of thing. We now have a commercially available where a company can say, hey, I want to come test this here in Chattanooga, or a researcher at a university can come test things. And so that's a tremendous opportunity for us, again, that EPB has afforded us. And how do we build on that? And that's part of the quantum collaborative that I'm now leading to say, what are as we think about other economic community benefits, how do we help prepare our workforce over the next 5 years for what the opportunities might be in quantum? How do we start to prepare our students for that? How do we work with our educators? So it is interesting. I'm an entrepreneur. I like to go fast. How do you make things happen quickly? And what are you trying to get to with a technology like this that's really complex and still maturing? When does quantum kind of have its open AI moment?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And what does that look like? It's just really interesting, fascinating, but there's a ton of money going into it from government, and there's a ton of money going into it from big tech companies.
Think back to the 1980s, your high school, college, and where Chattanooga was. It was a former manufacturer in town that was losing its jobs, that was losing population. Did you ever envision where we are today being a technology hub to a great degree?
No, but it's interesting, Mike, and you were asking earlier about why I wanted to move back here in the early 90s. The other thing, I didn't mention this, is just what Chattanooga was doing.
Yeah.
I know you had Keith Sanford on here recently, and you were talking about really the planning, the public planning that started in the mid-'80s that then led to one of the first signature outcomes of that was the aquarium. I remember coming here around 89 and 90, and I was going, oh my gosh, it's just people are moving back downtown. I said, what are we doing with our downtown? How do we get more folks along the river? And that was exciting to think about that.
And here we are 16 years later, and we're really seeing the advantage of that forward thinking at that time. I've long thought about the Volkswagen announcement, the Wacker announcement. Those were 2008. And we go into this horrible financial crisis in 2008. And I remember the year before, Chattanooga lost the Toyota plant to Mississippi.
That's right.
Toyota responded to the financial crisis by saying, we're going to put this plant on hold for a year, 2 years. Volkswagen went full bore ahead, and I think that's what got us through.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. And we were hanging our heads for a little bit after the Toyota decision.
Yeah,
but things work out for a reason sometimes.
Well, and everyone thought Huntsville would get Volkswagen just because of the tie to German history or in the von Braun Center and just all the technology in Huntsville at that time. But Chattanooga won out, fortunately.
Thankfully.
You know, we could do this for another hour, Charlie, and because there's a lot of things I want to get into, but I know you've got a busy schedule and we are coming to the end of it. But I do want to ask you one last question. But before I get to that, I do need to remind our listeners who makes all this possible, and that's the Tennessee Valley Authority, and TVA sponsors My Morning Cup. And I thank them for that. You can follow TVA on social media to learn more about its multifaceted mission of service and visit TVA.com/do-good-here to explore exciting TVA career opportunities. And related to TVA, you know, you go back, to the 20s, 30s, and the electrification of the valley. That was another huge economic development thing that's really helped East Tennessee more than anything else.
Yeah, it's huge. And actually, as you bring up TVA is one of the founding members and supporters of Chattanooga Quantum Collaborative. So I'm very grateful to them not only for what they do for our community, our region, our state. It's incredible. And I didn't appreciate that as much, quite honestly, until I was at LaunchTN. And some of the businesses that we're trying to attract here, and we're also talking to larger companies that were expanding here, that ECD was taking the lead on, but we were involved in some of those conversations. And the fact of TVA's reliable, affordable energy supply is just incredible. Again, we take that for granted sometimes, but just a quick shout out, TVA and also EPB, founding member, obviously, in court, and we wouldn't be here without EPB. The city of Chattanooga has been incredible, Mayor Kelly and team. And then UTC is doing some amazing things in quantum, and they're a founding member, as well as Oak Ridge National Labs. So we've got other members who are supporting the initiative that we're working with, but those five are integral to what we're doing here.
Well, and it does take a lot of different groups and people to do that. We're gonna have to 6 months, year down the road, do an update with you.
That'd be great. Love it.
But I do want to ask you one last question. It's not quite as businessy. So what would you tell your 25-year-old self is important for a happy life?
Get a core group. Well, the relationships that you have in your family and friends. And I would also say, as it relates, I think it's not just business, but it's personal growth and family growth. Get a core group of people, peers that you meet with on a regular basis, and that you can share everything with, and that will challenge you across different aspects of your life. And I joined something called EO, Entrepreneurs Organization, once Fox Smart Media hit enough of a revenue threshold to join, and I joined the Atlanta chapter. And I was going down every month for years and meeting with my forum group of 8 to 10 people. And it's just, you share things with them. And again, we're looking at business activity for sure, and aspirations and goals and challenges, but also personal and family. So I separate those two, family and then personal. Are you trying to go hike Mount Kilimanjaro? Are you trying to run a 10K? Are you trying to read 20 business books this year? Whatever. How are you challenging yourself? And that idea of being intentional, having a core group that you can, again, be totally honest and transparent and vulnerable with, and help you with aspirationally, with goal setting, has been huge. And I'm still very close with those folks. I had a call with one of them Friday just to catch up. And I've been out of that for a number of years now, but we still are very well connected and stay in touch and challenge each other.
Well, and I like that because, one, relationships are so important, but relationships from people who push you in a good way, challenge you is probably a better way to put it, because I can only say for myself, I do get in a rut where I just kind of think, well, I think this, so it must be right.
Yeah.
And you've got to have that other input.
Yeah, it's so important, and just helps keep you sharp and hopefully help keep you pushing yourself to grow and to learn. And none of us have it figured out.
No, and never will.
Never will.
Never will. I think that's the way the whole thing's set up.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Charlie, I've really enjoyed this. I appreciate you taking the time to come in and talk.
Thank you. It was great being with you this morning. Appreciate what you're doing and appreciate the opportunity to be part of it.
Well, thanks. Thanks for listening to My Morning Cup, a podcast by Costa Media Advisors. If you liked this episode, please share it with a friend. I release a new episode each week, So be sure to subscribe on Spotify, Apple, Google, or wherever you listen to podcasts.